Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the final three sessions of the Extraordinary Technology Conference 2017. This morning, it is my pleasure to introduce to you a first-time speaker here at the TeslaTech conference. Alan Adkins is going to be speaking on the cosmology of Walter Russell. He hails from Sedona. He is a self-described world traveler and a student of ancient history. He's a pioneer of CD-ROM technology, so we are indeed grateful for that work that he's done. Since a teenager, he's been inspired to work with spiritual technologies. He's recorded a 140-hour commentary on the Universal One, and he's in the process of applying Walter Russell sciences to practical applications. Please welcome Alan Adkins.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome. Good morning, everybody. How are you doing? All right. So, thank you for coming this early in the morning. Hope everybody's awake. Let's see if I can figure out how to use this. So I will start with a dedication. Seems like a good thing to do, to dedicate this talk to the Divine One, that which always has been, is now, and always will be all that is. So, how does one come to know the real truth about creation? Well, really, we know it from within our own self, and certainly this was true about the experiences of Dr. Walter Russell, who had a series of experiences in his youth and culminated in an extended 39-day experience when he was 49 years old. And so, as a result of that, he came back from that experience and set about documenting it in his inimitable way, unprecedented in, I think, modern history. Just a few things about his life. He did, after his 39-day experience, he did come back and write some books. His spiritual repository is mainly in the Message of Divine Iliad, but prior to that, he was a very accomplished person in all of the main arts, all mostly self-taught. He did have some lessons in sculpting, I believe, but just the minor, very minor. And it's important to note, and I will go over some things about Walter Russell because it may help you hold him in a certain regard or esteem when it comes to reviewing or trying to figure out what he was saying with respect to the science and the cosmology itself. So he was a self-taught composer, musician. He was a world-class, all of the endeavors he entered into were all performed at world-class level. His painting, his musicianship, he was a world-class horseman, an architect. I think he came up with the concept of the penthouse and many architectural firsts. He was also a world-class figure skater, scientist. Now the science and the cosmology in certain respects yet to be fully appreciated by humanity, much like Nikola Tesla was kind of overlooked. This is a shot of him working in his studio. He was a very prolific sculptor and painter. He produced a massive body of work, probably unprecedented if we were to add it all up and calculate it. This is a painting that he did. He was invited to Europe on a special tour, given many honors. This is a available if you want to do research on this aspect of his life. This is a miniature sculpture that he did. It was meant to be a much larger real life size, but you can see the fine detail. And actually, it's harder in some respects to do these smaller sculptures. So being enabled to vision the whole of every effect in nature and not just a small section of its cycle, he is painting many pictures of the cyclic effects, electrical, chemical, astronomical, including the invisible geometric forms of wave fields in space and the visible effects which these space forms control. Thus, the birth and death of matter, the growth and formation of atomic systems of the entire 9-octave range, from the inert gases to incandescent solids, the wave, the electric current itself, and its cathodes to anodes, which center loops of force. All these are being diagrammed and pictured in their full spectrum range. It's a quote from Russell. So Walter Russell had a full command of exactly how the divine brings creation into being. From the interface, you could say, of the two-dimensional flat plane into polarized centripetal vortice light. So the history of humanity is full of realizations where previously assumed so-called truths, so-called laws, or widely held beliefs eventually are shown to be either entirely incorrect or only partially true, which is what we will see with respect to Russell's cosmology. It is only when those who are given real and true divine insight through direct experience can one know. So this is the thing, and I want to bring this up to you today. As you listen to various quotes of Russell or comments about it, that you try to take it in and observe it as best you can. Because all of this information is within us. We can each come to know this, the veracity of it for ourselves, within ourselves. And that's really the best strategy, because it's really not, you can't like intellectually figure it out, at least not in its entirety. It's really not possible. And that's a very key factor in coming to the Russell science. So it's certainly true, the cardinal error of science lies in shutting the creator out of his creation. Of course, that doesn't actually happen, but there's a disregard, seemingly callous disregard for the role of the divine in the creation of the universe. The one basic error topples the whole structure, for out of it all of the other misconceptions of light, matter, energy, electricity, magnetism, and atomic structure have grown, which is a kind of a scathing comment, but nevertheless true. A particularly juicy quote is, light is not waves which travel at 186,000 miles per second, which science says it is. Nor does light travel at all. Even the so-called luminaries of our human science, Newton, Coulomb, Einstein, and so many others have made fundamental errors in their assumptions because of their limited sense-based observations. Had Newton sat with the apple for a week or two, he would have seen that that same apple rise into the heavens as a low potential gas seeking a like low potential position to balance its electrically divided state. The rising of the decaying and expanding apple again fulfills nature's law of like seeking like. All polarizing bodies add to their densities and potential. The apple which fell to the ground was a polarized body. All polarized bodies must reverse their polarities and depolarize. Then they lose their densities and potential. The polarized apple returned to the zero of its beginning. The Newtonian law is, in this respect, invalid because it accounts for but 1/2 of the apple's growth-decay cycle. This is a two-way universe of opposed effects in motion, not a one-way universe. And this is key. We have to realize that there is an unseen uphill flow of energy, you could say, there's a polarized, this is a polarized universe, so we have a reciprocation of exchange of states, and the fact that we can't see it or measure it with our sense-based, our senses, our human senses, or our instrumentation that is not able to directly observe this. So we tend to discount it and assume that it doesn't exist, which is, of course, foolishness. The Coulomb law statement that opposites attract and likes repel is not true to natural law. Let's see. Opposite conditions are opposite conditions. Likewise, they are opposite effects caused by each thrusting in opposite directions. It is not logical to say that opposites fulfill any other office than to oppose, nor is it logical to say that opposing things attract each other. In all this universe, like conditions seek like conditions. Gases and vapors seek gases and vapors by rising to find them in solids, and liquids seek solids and liquids by falling towards them. Opposite poles of the bar magnet thrust away from each other as far as they can go. This is the very purpose of the electric current, which divides the universal equilibrium. If opposite poles attracted each other, they would have to be together in the middle instead of pushing away from each other at the very ends. So this brings up an important point with respect to universal polarity. And this will be key as I get into other aspects of Russell's cosmology. Scientific observers have been mightily deceived by their senses into thinking that opposites attract each other because of seeing the north pole of one magnet pull toward the south pole of another magnet. If the Coulomb law were valid, it would not be possible to gather 1 ounce of any one element. So think about that. It just doesn't make sense, does it? Quantum theory not only claims that energy is within matter, but that it exists in bundles. Its very basis has no relation to nature anywhere, not to the workings of polarity, the great divider, nor to the electric wave. Bundles, quanta of any kind, of ultra nanoparticle or whatever kind can only vibrate due to polarity. Very key to fundamentally recognize and understand what he's saying. The only vibrations there are in nature are those interchanges between the two opposites of polarity, which extend from a fulcrum zero to a plus and minus zero. These are the destination points between which motion oscillates in sequences of reversals. The reversals are the pulse beats of nature. So these are just sort of some key background points that I wanted to bring up, and now I'm going to get specific into some things that you may or may not be aware of. One of the comments that Nikola Tesla himself made to Walter Russell after having read his Universal One, he gave out hundreds of copies to the scientific luminaries of the world at the time and some number of universities. Basically, nobody got back to him, maybe a couple of people or two or a few people. They were mostly, some of the people were kind of impolite and scathing and trying to demean him because he was upsetting the apple cart. But Tesla did say that his advice after reading it was to lock up his writings for 1,000 years until man was ready for it. Unfortunately, his wife, Leo Russell, talked him out of that, but the fact is that it is not easy to understand in first reading or even after 100 times, but again, we need to unlearn what we've incorrectly learned in order to learn the real story. So I'm going to read this excerpt from Leo Russell, a book about Leo Russell written by J.B. Yount called Remembered for Love. So Leo enjoyed hearing from Tesla's scientists and often recounted how she had persuaded Walter not to follow the great inventor's advice on limiting access to the Russell knowledge. I was also glad to know your appreciation of Nikola Tesla, she wrote one such student in 1984. My husband was very close to him in the last years of his life. So yes, Russell and Tesla were friends, and they did communicate. We have some communication in the archives of the university, but this is one of several key points. My husband was very close to him in the last years of his life. Tesla told my husband that he should lock all of his new scientific knowledge up in the Smithsonian Institute, for he said not only was the world not ready for it, but they would crucify him for trying to give it. However, when I met my beloved after my own illumination, I told him that the world desperately needed the new scientific knowledge now, and from the moment we met, we worked together, giving our combined messages from God to the world. I'm grateful to say that many scientists and other deep thinkers are not only listening, but acting upon our teachings, and my deepest desire is that great action will take place in time. So it will take place in time. So this is decades later, and I'm happy to say that we believe that time is fast approaching when Russell's science is finally going to come out in the world more and more. So this is this is a quote by Tesla about Albert Einstein. When asked for his opinion on the theories of contemporary Albert Einstein, Tesla gave a scathing analysis of relativity theory, calling it a magnificent mathematical garb which fascinates, dazzles, and makes people blind to the underlying errors. The theory is like a beggar clothed in purple, without whom ignorant people trade for a king. So Tesla was not bashful in pointing out what he thought as a correct estimate of Einstein. Now, I'm not here to bash anybody. I'm not trying to demean anybody or to judge anybody harshly necessarily, but we do have to call things as we see it, and certainly Russell did that in many specific respects, and it would be well for us to pay attention to him because he had the ability to discriminate, and he did know, as Tesla knew. And so the true source of all that is divine might, divine mind, divine light, divine love, otherwise known as the One. The nature or the actual fundamental qualities of the One are eternal omnipresent existence of pure being, eternal omnipresent divine consciousness, absolute divine bliss, which is in Sanskrit known as Sat Chit Ananda. So we are, all of us, endowed with a centering awareness, which is a seed of divine consciousness. Now this, I'm going to get into this more specifically, but it's important to note that for us to correctly understand what this universe is and how it's constructed, we do have to understand our particular role in that, and the fact that we have within us this divine seed of consciousness that allows us to we are fundamentally connected way more than we could imagine until we experience it. So this kind of awareness is essential for understanding Walter Russell. So one of the things that I want to share is back in 1927, Walter Russell helped Westinghouse solve within a few minutes a very thorny problem with respect to, I think, some kind of electroplating, if I'm not mistaken. And he did that willingly and happily for them, and in return for that, they gave him the use of a laboratory in Westinghouse facility. And this is a diagram of Walter Russell's transmutator, and this is a report from the Russell archives confirming that he was able to transmute from water, I believe it was about 17 different gases that normally should not be there. So he did really prove not just the theory, he actually proved and demonstrated his understanding of how to do elemental transmutation back in 1927. And he was, the people there, the scientists and whatnot, they were not willing to believe it was possible because of the extraordinary significance. I guess they just weren't ready to admit to themselves that it was possible. So this is an actual animation done by Ramu Shagis and Hannah Van Hook, who are members of our scientific team. By the way, I want to thank Ramu and Hannah for helping me with this presentation. Without their help, it certainly wouldn't be anywhere near the quality that it would otherwise be. So these are the main books that I would suggest with respect to Russell's science and cosmology. All of his books are fantastic, but for those who want to focus on the science, these are the main ones. Universal One, A New Concept of the Universe, the Home Study Course, Secret of Light, and Atomic Suicide. And those are all highly recommended and essential, really, for anybody who wants to fully explore Russell cosmology or Russell science. And then there's also a lot of resources on the Walter Russell website, which is created and maintained by Ramu Shagis. We have scanned copies of the old Fulcrum magazines that were published by the USP some years ago. A lot of really good information. So some useful definitions as knowingly defined by Walter Russell. Creation is an electric effect of two lights projected through each other, each alternately becoming the other. And I'm going to give some 3D animated animations that help to elucidate these concepts, but I need to just run through them real quickly so we can keep them in mind. Creation is an electric effect of two lights projected through each other, each alternately becoming the other. Matter is the result of centripetal force set up by the positive white light of the pair of electrical workers which seeks a center. White light is positive. It is that charging light which is going toward gravity, contracting as it gravitates. Black light is opposing, so-called negative light. It is that light which is going toward space, expanding as it radiates. Electricity, this is key. I mean, to anybody who is interested in applying Russell science cosmology to practical electrically oriented devices, this is key to understand. Actually, for any understanding, any correct understanding of the universe, I would say this is key. Electricity is that static, electricity is that elastic quality within light which manifests as two opposed strains pulling against each other, away from and toward a center, when the equilibrium of light is divided into two opposed pressures by the cosmic action of divine thinking. So what actually happens is the divine, to project the universe into being, the divine is able to create a polarized condition of the one divine light. And that tension, that stress and strain of that process of projecting it is, in fact, what electricity actually really is. And so you can think about it, you can contemplate it, but it is demonstrable, and as we shall see. Let's see. Gravitation and radiation are the electric results of the two opposed pressures, compression and expansion, which are produced by the extension and retraction of the one light from vertical points in space. Cause is one unchanging divine light as rest. Effect is two unchanging lights in motion. So the cause of the universe, of everything, is is the one unchanging divine light projecting it as an effect in the form of two unchanging lights in motion. An equilibrium or static condition is a state of rest in which there is perfect balance everywhere. Very important. This is the state of divine enlightenment, you could say. That when human beings or beings achieve divine awareness, they're able to achieve a state of stillness, complete equanimity, which is a kind of perfect balance everywhere. Or basically we can experience the reality of that within ourselves because part of ourself is actually in that space of perfect divine balance all the time. We just get distracted. Or we just need to find our way to having the awareness that that is the case. So a dynamic condition is one in which opposing electric forces attempt to upset the balance of the universe through motion and succeed only in creating two equal and opposite unstable conditions which balance each other but are each out of balance with their source. It is this condition of two unbalanced conditions which produces motion and is expressed as energy. Imagination is that quality. Imagination is the ability of static divine consciousness to divide and multiply the whole cosmic idea into three-dimensional forms of many seeming parts of the one idea and give them the appearance of motion in a time and space universe. Imagination is that quality within the conscious light which expresses desire for creative expression by simulating its divine reality with illusion of reality. And that is, in fact, what we experience, the illusion of reality in this physical, sense-based reality. So here we have one of Russell's many paintings, diagrams. The science of the future is based upon God, the Creator. God is light, God is mind. Very fundamentally key. I mean, it should be self-evident, but it's really, science has become a dogmatic religion not based on the truth, at least in so many respects. So mind is alone omniscient and omnipotent. Light is alone omnipresent. So it's fundamentally key to be aware that light is already everywhere. So light doesn't need to travel. It's already everywhere. What needs to happen is the projection of this polarized centripetal light vortices projecting light into what we call matter. So God's white mind light is dark to man until he divides it into spectrum pairs of red and blue lights to screen the white light of God's mind, which centers every creating thing. So there's a great book called In the Wave Lies the Secret of Creation, which was put together by a past USP president, Tim Binder, which I recommend. A lot of these images are in that, the Universal One, New Concept of Universe, and Atomic Suicide. So man's limited sense vision has caused him to see an objective universe of many separate, disunited things. When mind vision unfolds to a higher stage in the human race by increasing awareness of the divine light, which centers man, he will then see that everything in the universe is insolubly bound to every other thing. Science will then know that matter is but many focal points of one body. When a man multiplies gravity by casting a stone in the water, his senses see only wave ripples. They do not tell him that those ripples are equatorial ring series of expanding spheres which are dissipating gravity in the same ratio as it is being multiplied by the falling stone. The same principle applies to all actions. This is, in fact, the very basis of the universal life principle. Science has built a strange universe from sense evidence and has been mightily deceived. So, mathematical and measurable proof of the existence of but one mind, one force, and one substance would give to man absolute control over matter and the power to create even as God creates and within the same limitations. This is a fantastic quote by Walter Russell, and it emphasizes and underscores the fact that once we come to a direct experiential knowledge of the truth with respect to, mathematical and measurable proofs of the existence that the divine mind of the divine projects the universe, and that is that we actually live within this, we are that, it gives us the ability to control and to create even as God creates and within the same limitations. That's a tall statement, but nevertheless completely true. Even becoming demonstrable. We will enter into the age of transmutation. Walter Russell's already demonstrated it, as others. There are people alive on the planet who can demonstrate transmutation. It's just in our current modern time, it's a little bit precarious and maybe even dangerous to come out with that. But here we see an animation showing how the different dimensions take shape. Walter Russell created what he calls the 9-octave of the elements, cubic wave field, and these are kind of preliminary things to help illustrate how that happens. So nature divides one static condition into two equal dynamic conditions. This is, in fact, an accurate animation of how that process happens. So here we see and as the universe projects into polarity, we see these particular examples of compression and expansion that we see throughout nature. And it is this dynamic that we need to really understand. This is So again, the universe comes into being in a very simple way. The universe builds up from a flat plane, our three-dimensional and multi-dimensional world. So one of the main fundamental things about Russell Cosmology is this two-way polarity expansion contraction. And that happens fractally at every scale of existence, the most infinitesimally small to the most grandiose. It is actually true that universal maximum, the alchemical maximum, as above, so below, is true. And if we don't see that in a given cosmology or observation of the universe, then we have to at least suspect it, because it is actually true that as above, so below. So the same things that apply at a super nano, ultimately smallest scale to the most galactic, grandiose scale should be exactly the same. So as Russell says, this universe is a tonal one, a dimensionless universe of light. The pressures of all elements are organized in octave wave. The tones are multiplied and divided pressures of light, spaced rhythmically with mathematical precision upon an octave. And we see a diagram here of how this is Russell's example of the cubic wave field starts taking place. We have these points in space, and they are bounded by these what's called cubic structure, and I will show you progressively how these originate with an example in animation. And again, we don't have enough time to intimately go into each of these, but these are all available in Russell's various books. And can we cue the audio for this segment, John? This next animation. So here we see the emergence of divine light from the flat plane, cathode plane, centripetally winding up, vortices of light to the corner of the cubic wave field. So that was only recently accomplished animation, 3D animation of example of Russell's cubic wave field, which is the fundamental basis of Russell's cosmology. And I would submit that this is showing exactly how, in a more of an engineering step-by-step process, and to my knowledge, Russell's the only person that accurately describes this, how light actually is projected and how it builds up inside what we call the cubic wave field, and the dynamic of how that happens, how the centripetal vortices of light interact within the bounds of the cubic wave field model. And that same thing happens to build up this entire universe. It happens over time, and it's always a reciprocating polarity of motion. If that were to stop, the entire universe would disappear, like that. So here we see the universal example of how universal mathematics must apply to this cosmology. And we see how the fundamental the fundamental polarity is how it builds up and accretes the actual appearance of form in our created universe. It follows very precise and viable universal mathematical laws. And the math for this, by the way, has been done by Hannah in particular in our group, who's the very talented lady who did these animations. So they follow, exact mathematical laws, but this will only take you so far. Math is a useful tool, but it only applies within the realm of the effect. It doesn't really enter into the cause side of the equation. So that's why leaving out the creator, which is the cause, is not a good idea if you're trying to get at the real truth. So here we see a diagram by Russell showing how the expansion and contraction phenomena interplay happens with matter, with respect to matter and space. That there's always an equal amount of matter and space. They just interchange with each other. And here we see a polarity interaction discharge, rhythmic balanced interchange concept of Russell. Life is a complete constant interchange of these two polarity dynamics. And this is an early chart, the Mendeleev chart of the elements that Walter Russell completely redid. So the above reproduction of Mendeleev periodic table of the elements is published in the modern textbooks. This is going back to 1904. It's been updated somewhat, but the basic principle of this comment still applies today. It is the present chemical record of the visible universe, or the range of matter within the perception of man as of the year 1904, and to which very slight modifications have since been added. It is correct only in the orderly periodicity of atomic weight, which is mass dimension. In all other dimensions and periodicities, it is wrongly arranged. So Walter Russell is just flat out telling us that this is wrong. And he didn't just say that, he also demonstrated the correct arrangement, as we shall see. There is no eighth group. All marked with a circle are out of place in octave periodicity, and those marked with an X are properly placed. The inert gases of the zero group are incomplete, and 3.5 octaves are entirely missing. The chart is not a workable or practical chart for chemists' use, for it in no way relieves them of the necessity of experimenting in their laboratories to find out that which should be known in advance of experimenting. So like Tesla, Russell could see, because he did see, how the universe builds up, and anybody who really knows that, they don't really have to do much experimenting because they already know. And he's just pointing out that it's useful to know, and therefore it would be useful for us to rely on the fact that he did know and take him at his word. All periodicities of all effects of motion can be properly arranged on a workable and dependable chart, such as that which has been herein published. Incomplete as this chart is, Duncan says of it, the new knowledge, this periodic law of the atoms and God's alphabet of the universe is God's alphabet of the universe. By means of it, and by means of it only, can we ever hope to spell out the history and the future of creation. It lies here before us, lacking only the master word, the open sesame to creation, and who knows, to the Creator too. So here is Walter Russell's 9-octave table of the elements, showing the missing octaves before hydrogen, and it's important to note that Russell himself was the first to correctly identify tritium and deuterium and neptunium and plutonium. And so he actually was the person who originated the atomic age, not the previously identified perpetrators. But he also warned us, later in the atomic suicide book, the fallacies and the foolishness of taking up highly radioactive elements and refining them and then exploding and aerosolizing them all over the atmosphere of the planet. It's just probably not a good idea. And he explains precisely why that is and why, and having warned us, why we're experiencing the problems that we have today that are probably only going to get worse before they get better. So here we see the 9-octave chart on the right here. Oh, sorry. The 9-octave table of the elements on the right here is showing a different kind of diagram. We have carbon in the center. Central to Russell cosmology is the fact that as the universe projects itself and elements start building up, we have carbon, which is identified as the perfect element, which is a perfect sphere. And all the other elements before carbon are approaching the state of carbon, and then everything after carbon goes into a more or less increasingly preponderance, with respect to preponderance, increasingly radiative phase, where the elements go through a long process of radiating out back to source again, here after plutonium. And the omeganon, which is the end, only to restart again. So, you know, you can, with respect to radiation, for example, we can use this principle of electricity to make this process of when we're down in the radioactive range, for example, we can rapidly just cause this phase to unwind quicker. So even almost instantaneous. But having an understanding of this process allows us to create those kind of solutions. And here we have a close-up of the elements before hydrogen. We're starting to see some of this with some experiments like through the black light people in Boston or others. We're starting to realize that there's pre-hydrogen gases or elements. And in fact, there's quite a few, as you can see, before hydrogen. And it would behoove us to take Walter Russell at his word, because he has experimentally verified the veracity of these things. So you can see that as matter is arranged in tonal octaves, and there's a male and female side, because everything is polarized in the universe, so we have male and female elements. And applying that principle in chemistry and material science would produce a lot of excellent benefits and results. We could make up for a lot of lost time. And here we see some animations of how the 9 octaves dynamically are arranged. Oh, sorry about that. So this is a 9-octave table of the elements laid out in a different arrangement, so you can see the alignments of the amplitude and how the reciprocation of the male and female side interplay on this dial form of the chart. We see the winding up and the unwinding phase. And again, this is fractal. It happens at every scale in the universe. Same basic principle applies at every scale, which any true cosmology should and will have to do, by the way. If it's true and correct, it'll have to be follow the great alchemical maxim of as above, so below. And these things can and have been experimentally verified. So here we see the incorrect, incomplete Mendeleev table of the elements and the complete and correct chart as described and diagrammed by Walter Russell. Again, these are essential things to study and comprehend for anybody involved in anything to do with mass or elements or chemistry or material science of any kind. And this will become the basis for the science of the future, because it's true and correct. It's only up to us to see that it is and to then begin following it. And here we have a diagram showing how this effect is demonstrated in nature. We see it in the hurricane, the tornadoes. We see it in vortex mechanics. Okay. So this is the entire wave cycle as it builds up. A little overview. This is actually showing how mass builds itself up. So this is Russell showing the one unbreakable law, how the progression of potential builds up, and is demonstrated in this case with an explosion. This is, again, a little spiral exercise showing how spirals in nature form and geometrically why they form the way they do. And this is a famous spiral. This is a complete wave painting by Walter Russell, very famous, one of his very famous paintings, showing how the actual emergence from the cathode plane interplays, and how you have a simultaneous reciprocation of it's actually like a wave piston pump, which is actually the mechanical lever to which the entire universe operates. And here's the entire cubic wave field animation as it builds up. So the beauty of this is that through modern-day computer animation technology, we can bring to visualization the unseen part that Walter Russell and others like him, or that we ourselves could see if we could go deep enough and observe exactly how it happens. So this is the actual interplay of a complete cycle, colorized to show the progression of compression, different degrees of progression and potential as it goes through the cycle. And these are the two people who contributed a lot to the program. Hannah Van Hoek, very talented architect, engineer in Belgium, and Ramu Shagis, who's here. Thank you, Ramu, for your help. And these, again, are the books that I encourage anybody wishing an in-depth, thorough study of Russell science to acquire and study as much as you're able to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan Adkins.
So do we have any questions?
If you have questions, please come on up to the square. Bruce Forrester, he's on his way up.
What does office mean?
I'm sorry?
Office. What does office mean?
Office?
Yes, office.
I'm not sure what
You
you're
use the
getting at.
word, and Walter Russell uses it quite frequently. The office of this and the office of that. I already know the answer, but I'm asking you.
I'm not sure what you're getting at.
What does office mean? What does office mean? O-F-F-I-C-E. Walter Russell uses the word constantly. What does it mean? And you used it reading to us.
It could be understanding, a level of understanding, or your authority from which to speak about something.
I was mightily confused about that for months until I finally figured it out. It's an archaic meaning function, the function of something. Like the office of war is sin, or the office of creative work, make money, office. So for an aspiring Russellian, we are going to run into that word constantly, office. And you used it, reading to us. And that's my question, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
That is interesting. The LDS religion theology uses the word office a lot in that exact same definition for offices of spiritual progression. Angels and whatnot exist in certain offices to administrate to this plane of existence. Any other questions? Any other comments? Well,
No.
Thank you for that very informed presentation, and thank you for that information, because that's amazing stuff to digest. I know that Tesla was really a strong proponent of Walter Russell's work. So please give a warm round of applause to Alan Adkins.